Okay, welcome friends. So this little video tutorial is going to show you how to complete the Valentine cupcake in the art kit by SH Handmade. This image is kind of fun because it relies on our basic primary palette and a lot of tints. So we're going to be mixing with a lot of white. You can see the setup. If you are doing this with your friends or at your house, this is kind of what your setup should look like. You should have a couple of brushes, a liner brush for the more detail work, and a flat brush for the bigger areas. You'll need some water to clean your brush. You do want to keep your brush clean and dry, especially between colors. You'll need, of course, the paint that was provided to you in your cups. I've just put mine out on a plate. Yours will come in the cups. And then I have a second surface to mix on. You have a palette in your kit. And of course, you're going to need something to drink. So I've got my coffee. All right, so let's get started. A couple of notes about painting with acrylic. Essentially, acrylic is liquid plastic. So when it dries, and it dries very quickly, it is difficult to remove from brushes, clothing, any kind of porous surface. It will sink into it. So that's just something to be aware of while you're working, especially a note of your brushes. When you are not using a brush, you want to keep it in the water. And then when you are ready to use the brush, blot it dry. You can mix acrylic with water, obviously, but for this technique, we are not doing that. You want to use the thickness of the paint as it's provided to you. It has a better viscosity and density, and it will cover better. So we're doing a direct application. We are not doing washes or glazes, which is what you would get if you mixed it with water. Looking at our image, we are going to start with the background area, and then we're going to move into the details of the actual subject of the cupcake. Your canvas, so you have an image in your kit to kind of look at, to refer to colors, and then your canvas is already drawn. So we're going to start with the background, and we're going to lay down a light yellow. So in your palette, and this is how I like to use my colors, I only pull off a little bit of a color at a time and mix it. I don't mix all of my yellow into all of my white and so on, just because then I don't have that original color to work with. So I'm going to mix kind of a tint, not a lot of white in it. I'm just going to tone it down just a smidge, okay, of the yellow. And I'm going to go in, I'm going to do pretty much the entire background like that. So we're painting the entire background. Don't forget to do your edges. This is a wrapped canvas, so you're doing the whole thing, okay? And even the little like swirly designs and stuff, the designs that you're seeing, especially through the yellow, you're still going to be able to see those. So don't worry like, oh, I'm going to paint over what I'm trying to see. You're still going to be able to see those, and they'll be there for our next layers of color. So this is going to take us a second. One of the things to keep in mind while you're working is that you are covering the surface. You want to try to reduce the appearance of brush strokes in this first layer. So I'm just kind of smoothing it out to where I just have even coverage. You know, I don't want to see a lot of brush strokes. And I'm going to come down and paint all the way around the cupcake as well. So all of that's going to get filled in. Okay, nice even coverage of our yellow mixed with white. In the background, again, kind of working with our background first. So I'm blotting my brush dry, and we're going to do some of the pink. So you can kind of see in your sketch where the pink areas are in the background. One of the things about this image is it is blendy. It's very blendy looking. Ours is probably going to look less blended, just because blending with acrylic is difficult. because it dries so quickly. Okay, so we're doing a pale pink. What that means is you're gonna want a lot more white than red. You can kind of see where I'm playing with my amounts until I get that like Pepto pink I'm going for. Okay, and that's what I'm going to use to block in some of the areas of the pink on my canvas. And in this case, I want it to be kind of sketchy, so it's okay with me if some of the yellows and stuff show through. I'm actually going to wrap it around the canvas so that those like blotchy areas kind of look like, it should look very painterly. That's the word I use for this. And then I'm not reloading my brush a lot, and when I get out here to the edge of this shape, I'm not really reloading my brush so that it looks a little like faded. That's about as close as we're getting to blending very much here. Okay, so I'm just not putting much on my brush. So we get this more dry brush technique for the pink. And I might come back and do the middle of that a little bit more, but I'm going to kind of jump around a bit. All right, so then I'm going to come in and do some of that pink up here. Again, just kind of sketchy. This is where the direction of your brush strokes is kind of important. So if you see the textures in the color, you want to incorporate your brush strokes in that. So if there's a texture that is going horizontally or that is following a swirl, you want your brush strokes to do that as well. So in that first layer, we didn't worry too much about the brush strokes, but in this layer, we do. And it's kind of like a swirly lines around the main shape of the cupcake especially. You see that? So and then I'm going to kind of dry brush around it, dry brush around it. Again, I'm going to take it off the edge. I'm just a little bit wet, hesitating to pick it up. Just going to drag my brush across the top up here to get some of that dry brush. Okay, similar here. I'm just kind of looking at where the swirls are, where the splotchy parts are. I think the most important thing here is keep that, you can see this like shadowy outline around the cupcake. You definitely want to keep that. That's kind of an important part. Okay, so not very much paint on my brush here, okay? Not a lot of paint at all, so I can keep it kind of sketchy and loose, dragging it to the outside. You can always come back and put on more paint, but it is very difficult to lift it off. You'd have to paint over it if you did too much initially. And that just gets to be a little difficult. So we'll try to avoid that. And the nice thing about this background is it's just supposed to look blotchy and sketchy. I mean, you're not like, you don't have an outline of every single space that's on the original canvas, because there is some opportunity here to kind of ad-lib and have fun with it. If you get the general idea that it's just supposed to be swirly and colorful into the background. So basically anywhere that I see a little bit of pink, I am sketching that in. I'm wrapping it to the back of the canvas. And I'm just trying to stay true to where some of the pinks and blues and yellows are in the original image. Sketchy, sketchy, sketchy. These are not like very clearly defined shapes. So dry brush, you probably notice I have not loaded my brush very much at all, and that's on purpose. Just looking to see, I can always come back and drop in a few colors here and there, but I just want to block some of this out initially. And there's even a little bit of sketchy in that as well. So and for these like super sketchy lines and textures, especially what kind of represents the bottom or maybe the surface that this cupcake is on, take your brush strokes primarily horizontally, and I'm also turning the brush, instead of using it by its wide side, I'm using it by its skinny side and just kind of laying in some lines. Okay, all right, I'm gonna wash my brush. I know we have other areas that are pink, but right now I'm just focused on the background areas that are pink. So we're going to create a light blue to finish kind of blocking out the background. So again, we're creating a tint. So I'm going to scoop up some of my white, bring it over here beside the blue. You can do this on your palette however you choose to, but I want to create kind of a pale baby blue. I would say your ratio is, you're maybe looking at 20% blue and 80% white. I mean, that's the balance you have there, so it's just a baby blue. So I'm gonna pick up that color. Now I'm gonna look at my image and kind of where are my swirls and bits of baby blue. Again, I'm not really loading my brush up a lot, but when I use it, I'm taking it around the edge of the canvas. That's actually probably a little more baby blue than I want it to be, but I'll come back and add on to that. Okay. So I'm blocking in, and this is where about 2 layers in, you're starting to lose your lines. That's why we're just going ahead and doing some of this, because you're starting to lose your sketchy lines. And that's okay, that's what we want. Obviously, we don't want to see those in the finished product, but we just want to go ahead and do what we're doing here, make sure that we have this. Now, I am being very, very ad lib about how I want to do this. This is not, your shapes are blocked out, but it's really not like a paint by number kind of thing. I mean, as long as you're getting swirls and colors in the background, this is where your enjoyment of what you think it should look like and what you want how you want your colors to blend. You really like start looking at the canvas. It should have kind of a little life of its own, not just the one that I planned for. What do you plan for it? Okay, this blue is definitely lighter than I maybe wanted it to be, but that's okay. I'm going to punch it up here in 1 second. So I'm still blocking out where I wanted my light blues to be. I'm doing some of the streakies. Definitely want to go right underneath here. And again, not a lot of paint on the brush. Not a lot of paint on the brush. Okay, very, very dry brush technique. Just laying in little patches of color. Little patches of color. If the color goes to the edge, I would recommend that you take it around the edge. That's just. So the art teacher in me cannot keep myself from saying that this is more of like, this background is definitely kind of an impressionistic technique. You don't have super clear shapes. You have more like spots and drops of color that are blending with each other. And I'm just using the colors the way I think they work. Okay, that was a little bit lighter than I wanted it to be, so I'm going to punch it up just a little bit by pulling a smidge more blue into it. I still want the white, okay, not pure blue. I'm pulling a little bit more blue into it, and I'm just going to go back into the middle of those shapes and add a little more. And then go back in where I see lines and where I see more textures. Do a little more swirling. because the blues were definitely a little bit darker than what I initially mixed. So I'm just going back and picking that up a little bit. Just get a little more intensity of blue. Okay. All right, and we're just going to keep working on our background, and that way just blocking it out, wrapping it around, little spots of color, little sketchy lines of our blue. And now, okay, all right. Okay, so now we're, even though we're still in the background area, we're gonna look a little more specifically at the parts that are associated with the cupcake. So I'm gonna look at this little swirl of the shadow, and I'm gonna go in with a deeper, somewhat deeper blue. It's still mixed with a little bit of white, but I'm going to go right along the bottom edge, drop a little shadow there, and then I'm going to pull it out into this oval shape that kind of trails off the edge, and I'm going to fill that whole thing initially. I'm going to establish the base for that shadow. Okay. Okay, and then I'm washing my brush, and I'm going to come back and grab a little bit of the pink, the darker pink, and I'm going to do this little color within the shadow. And some things are happening here that you're getting, like by putting down the blue first and then the red or the reddish pink back over top of it, you're getting a little more depth to your shadow, which is what we want. I'm going to go ahead and drag that under so that essentially it becomes like a deep purple right along the edge. Okay. Okay, so we're going to move from the background now into the main subject of the cupcake. So a couple of different ways to think about this, but we're going to start with red on all of the frosting. It's going to be like our base color. So the heart and all of the frosting we're going to do in this red. Now, unlike the background where we weren't like terribly concerned about our edges and things like that, now we are. Okay, so we're going to slow down a little bit. We're going to turn the angle of the brush so that we are kind of dragging along the edge of the heart, because this is such an important shape. We want to keep it. So load your brush, turn your brush so that you are just dragging along the edge with a little bit of pressure. It's going to help the bristles maintain this nice crisp edge. Okay, keep your brush loaded just with a little bit, not, you know, like the little, just the initial tip of the bristles. And I am, now if your background overlapped into the heart shape, that's fine, because you're going to cover it up. You can still see that. It actually kind of helps, if I'm being honest, because then you have a little bit of wiggle room. It's better to have overlapped the background paint into it than to have a gap of unpainted canvas between them. Okay. So really the heart is probably the only like super high stress shape. Well, that's ironic, isn't it? Okay, the heart is the high stress shape. Of course we want that shape to be fairly precise. Okay, so we're painting in the heart. Let's move on. Now we're going to put down our base coat on the frosting. And I realize the frosting is more pink than red, but we're going to layer a lot. And even though that's the same color, I am painting so that my brush strokes match the edge of the heart. And I am also wanting to see, try to maintain the edges of the frosting pretty well. So again, if you painted over the frosting edges with the background, that is okay. In fact, maybe a little helpful. And you're still going to be able to see the lines that we initially did, from your canvas for the frosting. So don't be concerned that you're going to lose that. You should be able to see those still. Okay, so we are painting in the frosting area. Okay, in the spirit of kind of covering everything, we're going to go ahead and paint the rest of all of our shapes. So I'm going to paint the cupcake, the remaining cupcake shape, the kind of exposed cupcake. I'm going to paint that all yellow. And if you picked up a little bit of red from the frosting, especially over here on the right side, not a big deal because we're going to layer it a lot anyway and make it a bit darker. But I just want to get down a base color. So this yellow, this particular yellow, I haven't mixed it with anything. I'm just putting it on there as is. It's a straight yellow. Okay, now for the lower portion of the cupcake paper, you can kind of see it's kind of an orange. So we're gonna pull a little bit of red, a little bit of, that wasn't red that I got initially, was it? A little bit of yellow and a little bit of red. And we're gonna mix in orange. Now, that's a pretty bright red orange right there. I might wanna tip it more toward an orange. Here we go. And I am gonna mix just a touch of white with it. So I'm just pulling a little bit of white so that it looks a little more orange. Okay, and that is what we're gonna use for we're gonna do the whole bottom portion of the cupcake paper. We want to fill in this whole thing. Again, trying to maintain the shape. And it has this little scalloped shape. I mean, don't be too concerned if you lose some of that. We can pick it back up later for sure, but this is also one of those times when the brush strokes do kind of help to accentuate the shape, because we're going to be doing some vertical lines here that show the like folds of the cupcake later. So if your brush strokes are already kind of pulling in that direction, it actually makes it easier. So just kind of pull those brush strokes down. And then I usually have to go along the bottom. Sometimes it helps to tip your canvas, especially, you know, depending on your handedness. I'm right-handed, so I kind of have to pull. I'm using the brush at an angle to maintain a nice edge. I'm pushing just a little bit of pressure. And then I'm going to capture the rest of this edge. Then I'm just going to pull out that edge so everything's kind of moving toward the top. Okay, that is our cupcake base. And then I'm going to clean and dry the brush and do a light blue on the upper portion of the cupcake base. So cleaning, drying my brush. We already made a light blue over here, but you may or may not have enough of it left. I think I can do it. It's not a very big space. So this, I feel comfortable using my same brush, the flat brush, and I just use it on its edge. If you find these little spaces a little more challenging, you feel like you need a little more control, you absolutely can switch to your finer tipped brush for this. But for the purposes of just blocking in this whole shape, I just find it easier to turn my flat brush on its side. Don't forget there's a little piece of the paper that kind of wrapped to the back there, so you don't want to lose that. It helps to add to the three-dimensional look of the paper. Try to keep that little bit of scalloping around the edge. And then the scalloping around the bottom edge. Now while we're painting this, we've treated the two sections of the cupcake as two different shapes because of their colors and values. But in the next steps, we'll be working kind of the whole thing, and it'll look a little more cohesive. Right now, you know, we were addressing the fact that this was a different color than the bottom portion of it, but in the next steps, we'll be looking at how do I make that look a little more like it's one unit, just with two different color areas. All right, so we're getting into the frosting. This is when it gets fun. This is also when we really have to think about like values. So anytime you're painting something, you can essentially, if you can remind yourself that every object, if you want it to look more three-dimensional, like these beautiful little swirls of frosting, is essentially going to have a light, a medium, and a dark area. And if we look at this frosting and try to find and block out its light, medium, and dark areas, that's going to help us really give it that three-dimensional quality. So we are going to mix a bright pink, and we're going to paint the parts of the swirls that have that bright pink feature. So I'm going to kind of work from right to left. So I'm going to start over here. I'm going to do bright pink, bright pink, bright pink, bright pink, bright pink, 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 maybe a little on the bottom here, a little on the bottom here, okay? But those are the areas we're gonna start with first. So we're gonna come over, we're gonna mix up a bright pink, not as light as our background pink, okay? This is more maybe a 50-50 mix of white and red. maybe even a 60-40, leaning into the red a bit more, because I really want it to be, I don't want it to be super pastel looking. Okay, so you're mixing up this pink on your palette. Again, I am using my, just because we're still in some big areas, I'm using my flat brush, and I'm going to come over here. I do find it easier though to make sure that I don't have a ton of paint in the brush other than the tip. So I kind of push it off and then pick it up on the tip so I can control it better. Okay, so I'm going to come in and swirl in this swirl with a bright pink. And I'm going to do the whole thing. And in the video, I'm not sure that you're going to see the huge difference between the pink and the red, but it's definitely there, okay? And it's what we want. The red is just giving us a base. So I'm doing this swirl. I'm going to do this little section down here. And if you think of them as each one's their individual section, and I'm going to make over here, I'm making the right side the pink, and I'm leaving some of that red as it goes into the crease, because that's going to help me create the dark shadow. So I come into this little fold. Okay, and you can see where I left a little bit of red there. Just helps me. Now I'm starting to try to break it up into individual parts. I'm going to come in and do this big swirl across the middle. And do it as all pink. And again, I'm just using the flat brush, kind of laying it on its side. And if you look at just that shape, it fades into kind of dark, and I'm going to let it do that. I'm just going to kind of fade to the red. Like, don't paint it all in. Okay, got another one, this big swirl on top up here, right here. All of it is pink all the way to the edge. Okay, and you can already see all we've added here. We have literally 2 values on this so far, and it already starts to look more three-dimensional. It really is the secret sauce when you're painting something, if you can at least incorporate 2 to 3 values, 3 probably being the ideal. Okay, let's see what else we got. This big section through here is a pink. So what I was looking for are all of the shapes that are kind of the same value of pink, and that's what I'm blocking in right now. And then I can get a little swirly there at the top. Okay. And then I feel like there's one more definite area, like right here. Okay. Now at this point I'm going to look at my image and just be like, okay, do I see other areas that are like this medium pink? So we hit here, 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 this one. I might come in and do a little bit under this little swirl and just make sure that I got it there. I feel like that is right here. Just a little bit. Okay. All right, now we're just going to lighten our pink. So we're gonna take that same pink and we're gonna pull in a little more white. And this is also a good time, should have mentioned this earlier probably, but you want to try to maintain some of your white. Like there's going to be a point at the end where we're going to do some little highlights and stuff, and you don't want to have mixed up all your white. That's why I pull the white and mix it in a different section or a different area, because I don't want to lose all of my white. So now we're going to go in and do the lightest values of the swirls. So there's a light value area here, like this area. I'm still using my big brush while I block in some things. I am about to switch to the smaller window. We're getting close. All right, so I'm gonna do that little light value area. I'm gonna do this light value area on top. I'm gonna do this light value area on top. And here. And there's a big one right there. Okay, now there are some, we kind of had a medium pink and a light pink. I feel like I need a medium pink, so I'm going to incorporate a third pink value. And the way I'm doing that is, look, and I'm mixing my medium pink with my light pink to create like an intermediate value. And I'm going to use it here because I feel like when I look at that image, that's a different value of pink that I did not see before. And I'm also going to swirl it or stroke it into this part a little bit. Now, as you do this, as you look at this and you start doing this, you don't want to lose your overall swirly shapes. So just be careful about, you can see where I'm trying to maintain some of the lines that I had, because the lines are what gives it some definition. You don't want to lose that entirely. I'm going to come in, there's like a little divot right here that I feel like needs to be defined. And you can notice also that a lot of your lighter values are concentrated on the left-hand side. We're going to do some darker values on the right-hand side here soon. Okay, but I'm just, right now, just kind of pulling in where I see that it needed a medium pink. Okay, I think I'm going to switch to my smaller brush now. So I'm switching to the smaller brush. Again, the brush is clean and dry. I'm going to use some of the lightest pinks, and I'm going to pick up the ripples, like these smaller edges where the frosting kind of wraps around. So that was essentially taking this edge and just carrying it all the way around. You can actually follow, that's the line that's in the drawing. And then this top edge, little shape, was very light, and then it carries around. And I'm just gonna kind of drag it. I'm not gonna try to make it super thick or precise. I'm just dragging the color through. Similar thing up here. This is very, very light. And this is very light. This top edge is very light, so I'm going to drag along that top edge. Okay, this top edge is very light. I'm going to drag along that top edge. Here. So right now we're just concentrating on the light side, and you can see it's really starting to look much more three-dimensional. At this point, I'm actually going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to pick up some just pure white. Just straight up white. And I'm going to drag it through this top edge. Pure white. I'm going to put some on the top up here, and I'm just doing it with little like dots of color. Like I don't want it to fill the whole thing. I'm kind of little dots and spots of color. So it does a couple of things. It kind of picks up the texture, gives you a little feel for the texture of the cupcake, like those little reflections. And the highlights are very thin. They are supposed to show you the edges of things. So you do not want to like block in anywhere super solid white, because the white is there to show you an edge. Ooh, okay, and then I've missed this. Look at this big area. That's pretty much and that is not white, that is pink. So let's come back and put some pink in that. And then you can kind of see how that wraps around the top. And it really starts to give you the feel for the textures of it. Okay, so that's our light side of the frosting. We're gonna stop there for now. And on the right side of the frosting, where we have more shadows in that area, we have more shadows, so we're going to mix up a little bit of purple. So we're gonna take a smidge of red, smidge of blue, well, probably more than a smidge because we need it a good bit. Now, purple, if you just use the pure color, purple is, oh, I didn't realize you couldn't see that, is so dark. You really don't even see the color in it. So I'm going to pull in a tiny, tiny bit of white so you can actually see it more as purple, because otherwise it just reads as kind of like super black, almost black. Okay, so you can see I pulled in a little bit of white, so I have this purpley plum-like color. We're going to try that in our shadow area. So we're going to come into the right side of the cupcake, and we're going to find all the little shadow areas. So there's like little shadow area under here where the, you know, the little heart is seated. So little shadow here. These are so small. So I'm definitely using my liner brush. There's a little shadow here. It's like, think of it like the shadows are where like the creases of the frosting are. And this is actually one of the things that I love about painting, is thinking about the construction of something. I mean, we are like, yes, we're doing something that's two-dimensional, but you have to think about the construction of it, like the folds and the divots and the little. So I am just ever so slightly adding a little bit with my liner brush to the creases, like what would be the deepest creases on the right side. I shouldn't even really been touching the right side. Sorry, I digress. Okay, so now I'm going to come back to the left side where our super obvious shadows are. So I'm looking for the obvious shadows, the darkest areas. I'm really going to push them in, push them back with a little bit of color. Don't overdo it, okay? A little bit goes a long way. One way to, if you were kind of following along with me, one way to think about it is to look for the areas that now really are pure red, because those are the areas we haven't painted yet, and that's where we're likely going to be adding our shadows. I'm just, one thing when you're working with your liner brush is if it gets full of paint, it doesn't line so much anymore. So sometimes if I really want to capture, like I want to go back and get this edge, if I really want to be able to maintain that point, I will clean the brush and then reload it again, because once it gets some paint in it, it's just hard to get the line. So, okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and do it even though we haven't worked on the actual cupcake form yet, but you can see little shadows underneath here. I'm just gonna lay this purple in that I've created, because when I paint the rest of the cupcake, it's gonna help us get that. So, okay. All right. So for the most part, our cupcake frosting is done. So let's move on to our next steps. Okay, apparently friends, I did the cupcake and did not have the video setting on, you know, go me. So here's what I did. Let me explain it. I'm not gonna try to redo it because I'm gonna mess it up, but I was using the medium-sized brush, and I took some of the orange that we already created, mixed it. I took some of the orange that we already created, and I did a shadow side on the right side. And the shadow side had this diagonal edge, so to speak. It's not really an edge because we're going to blend it out, but when you paint it in, this is primarily your orange. And then we took the orange and mixed with a little bit of yellow and painted along the edge, like half onto the original yellow, half onto the orange that we added kind of to it in an attempt to blend. And I had said that we are not going to blend, and I meant that, but maybe just here a little bit. So then you can take a little bit of this orange and yellow mixture together on your brush, and you do, to get this kind of like texture of the cupcake, if you do little tiny like C strokes, little tiny C strokes, like little miniature C's. And I will sometimes turn like the canvas so that I can get into those little scalloped edges and stuff better. Do not fret over this area. If you're like, yeah, that's really not working for me, just come back in and paint some yellow into the middle of it, okay? And what I would say about this portion of it is this is not the star of the show. Yes, it's a part of the cupcake who is the star of the show, but the star of the show is the frosting and the heart, okay? So don't be like, oh, can't get it. Just, if it primarily goes from light yellow to a darker yellowy orange, you're golden, okay? All right, so now we're going to take the rest of the cupcake. So I'm gonna take, debating how to do this, because I'm going to take my smaller brush and I'm going to mix some orange, and don't look at me like I'm crazy, and blue. Okay, now the reason you're going to mix orange and blue is because it makes this great like brown color, okay? Which brown gets a bad rap, but you know what? Brown is a great color, and there's so many different ones of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that brown, and then I'm going to come back and find all of the little folds, the little creasy things. And I'm just going to, with not a full brush, kind of a dry brush, I'm going to drag and lift. I'm going to drag and lift. I'm going to drag and lift. I'm going to drag and lift, and you can kind of see like the lines were already there for you. They kind of like ray out a little bit. So drag and lift, drag and lift. Figures I'd have to reload for the very last one. Drag and lift. Okay. So we're just establishing where the kind of the folds are of the cupcake. Then I'm going to take some of that same brown, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to paint kind of the bottom corner of the cupcake paper. I'm really going to push it into shadow. So from about halfway over and then to the right, and then pulling up and along this whole edge. And then I'm just sort of gonna do it up here too. And up here. Okay. And then I'm just gonna block all that in. And this is again where brush strokes matter. I'm gonna kind of follow the little fanny feeling of the cupcake paper. Okay. Then I'm gonna take that same brown and I'm going to very lightly outline the other side and along the bottom. Okay, we'll be coming back to that brown, but we're pretty much done with it for now. Okay, then we're gonna take the orange. Remember the orange that we created. We're gonna take the orange that we created. We're gonna add a smidge of white to it to make it a lighter value, because remember, everything really is just a mixture of light, medium, dark values. Just a smidge. So, and I'm going to come in, and it's like the brown made the folds, the creases. Now this is going to make the top, the high parts. Okay, so I'm going to drag just to make the high parts. So it might need to be just a smidge more white. Can't really see it. There should be a little bit of contrast there. Okay, so you can really see that. Drag, 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 drag. Okay. Alrighty. Then we're going to kind of do a similar thing with the light blue parts. So I'm going to take the light blue and I'm going to mix just a slightly darker version of it. Just a slightly darker version of it. So, and I'm going to come in and where the creases are. So if you look at kind of the color of the cupcake holder, it's a darker blue over here, so I'm going to come in and just make that a little bit darker. I'm going to make those top edges a little bit darker. That paint got a little watery. Make sure your paint brush is dry, right? Okay. You get better coverage. Okay, making that a little bit darker. Making that a little bit darker. And what I'm doing here is I'm putting the darker value, the slightly darker value, to the outside edges of the blue part. So they'll have that little blue part is like a cup shape, and I'm gonna make the outside edges of it darker because that's where the creases would be. And I used more blue, made it darker on the right side in the shadow area than I did on the left side. So this whole image has kind of like a pop art feel to it. I mean, you're not trying to create, you've probably noticed that already, you're not really trying to create like precise colors. You're using some fun colors, and I'm just like adding these little details around the top. Okay. Now I'm going to come back. I'm going to pull up a little bit more of that brown, and I'm going to add just a smidge, ever so small, right here, just to show the like shadow of the cupcake, just ever so slightly, right here, 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 here. Again, that's not the star of the show. However, you want it to be nice enough that it doesn't look like, oh, they forgot to paint that area. Okay, so there's probably more we could do there, but I'm pretty happy with that. All right, let's come into the shadow area a little bit more though. So I'm gonna switch back to my bigger brush, and I'm gonna pick up pretty much like a pure blue. That might be too much, might have to tone it down, but that's what I'm going to do over for now. And I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna just treat that darkest area right along the edge, right along the edge, right along the edge, and pull it out. I'm just going to pull it out. This is called deepening the shadows. That's all we're doing, is deepening the shadows. And then I'm going to go in and do just a little bit. You can do this with your liner brush if you're not comfortable using your other one, but I'm good with this one. And I'm just deepening the shadows right underneath of it. You really want it to feel like, hey, this is sitting on a surface. Okay, now we can deepen shadows other places too. For instance, those shadows on the cupcake have a lot of blue in them. You may want to deepen some of the shadows there. So I'm going to take this pure blue. I'm going to go into, when I say deepen the shadows, I mean think about the very, very darkest area. So it's almost like the middle of the shadow. Oh, we'll call it the boogeyman part of the shadow. The deepest, darkest recesses. Again, doesn't take very much. You can see how little I'm using. I also think that stuff like this makes shadows, what would be the word I'm looking for? Like make your shadows sing. Because some people, and you might notice, actually maybe this is a great time to mention this, you might notice that you had black in your kit. I don't think we're even going to touch it, because you really don't need black for much. Obviously there's going to be other kits that you might pick up and you'll be like, yeah, we definitely use black. But a lot of times you don't. The colors that you might need or want and that are really going to work in your painting are going to be the knowing what to mix. So we really, this is very much a primary color scheme painting. We really just focused on the use of red, white, and blue, or red, blue, and yellow, and mixing it with white. I am going to pull just, now I'm to the point, okay, you're probably to this point too. If you're still with me, you're like, wow, you're really all in on what I'm doing, because I'm totally, like, we've hit this point in most painting parties that I've done. This is the point where people are like, yeah, I'm not listening to you anymore. I'm just doing my own thing. And that's great. So, but if you want your own thing to be similar to what my own thing is, then by all means follow along. But this is where I really start looking at it and be like, okay, where do I want a little punch of a darker value, or where do I want a little punch of a lighter value? And we haven't really touched that heart again. So I've picked up some of the purple, and you know, if this gives you anxiety, it gives me anxiety too, because I'm like, yeah, this is like the most important part. I don't want to mess it up. But I loaded my brush and I took a little bit of purple, and I am just hitting that edge, and yeah, like that a lot. Okay, then I'm gonna rinse and dry my little brush, and I'm going to pick up just a smidge and do a little bit of the little highlighty stuff around the top. Okay. I might go back into my cupcake and really look at where are the lightest areas. Like, did I miss any of these little highlights? Because I feel like there were more areas that could have been lighter. But then there is also that point, folks, where you gotta go like, okay, I gotta stop, gotta walk away. But it's hard to know when that is. This also can be a fun time to go back in, you know, obviously you're looking at your background. Maybe you want to mix a smidge brighter blue and really play with some of those swirls. And you know, that what was there was simply inspiration. Now you can just have fun with it. I feel like I lost a lot of my pink, so I might come back in with more pink here in a minute. Ooh, that's bright. Okay, you run into that, you're like, whoa, 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 not what I had in mind, too bright. I'll just fix it. I'll just tune it down, no biggie. No biggie, right? No stress. Oh my goodness. Okay, like I gotta admit, this is a fun little image. But I want to do, I think I want some more pink. So I'm gonna pick up some of my pink with my swirly brush, with my smallest brush. And I'm gonna see if I can do just a little more pink swirls or go into those a little bit better. So I like the, this is where acrylic is meant to be painterly, I guess. And if you're not familiar with that term, but acrylic is really lends itself to, I want to see the brush strokes. I want to, you know, I want it to feel like the painting has a little bit of texture to it. And I like acrylic for those qualities. Now, some people, if you've painted and you're like, you have experience with oil paint or something, you might be like, okay, yeah, that's not fun because it doesn't blend that way. But they are two very different mediums for a reason. And yeah, so it just feels different. Things feel different. I tend to be a very linear person. So when I paint, I think of it as painting, as drawing in color. So I tend to be more linear, and I like that quality of acrylic where I can draw with it. But you really have to think. So the whole process here has become, I started with these big shapes and I really concentrated on value, and then you really hone into small shapes and then down to lines. Okay, I'm seeing something that I really want to just punch up a bit. So I'm taking my purple and I just want to deepen the shadows here just a smidge. Just a smidge. Okay. All right, this is where I need another person standing over me going, okay, you're done now. But I'm going to deepen the shadows right here too. I know what I said. I know I said it wasn't the star of the show. I meant it. Okay. But I still want it to look good. Okay, folks. I hope you have enjoyed this painting. Oh, and last but not least, do not forget to sign your artwork. Please share it with me if you're on Facebook. I have a presence on SH Handmade. Share or tag me in your post if you painted this with a friend, and I hope it was an enjoyable way to spend your time. Have a wonderful day.